Hello book fans, it's a Maverick review today and we are going to be looking at Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Defoe, his original name was Foe, so maybe I'll refer to him as Foe because the D bit is just a bit of a posh thing that was added by him to appear great. And this is known as the first novel in the English language, and it may well be. But there were novels produced in other languages well before this one, so bear that in mind before you answer a pub quiz. The oldest novel is in the Japanese language, so there you go. Way before this one. Okay, so who is Robinson Crusoe? Do like and subscribe if you're well into Robinson Crusoe and book reviews, by the way. So Robinson Crusoe is basically a reckless survivalist saviour and cat drowner. This is not how I remember this guy being when I was a child. I remember him as being this positive character who survived on an island and by his own wits, and was wearing a straw hat, I think, and he had his good trusty buddy Man Friday, although I may have read a child's version of this novel. This is not what the novel is entirely about. The novel itself takes a moral stance and takes us through the progress of Robinson Crusoe's moral journey as he goes from the kind of bad-ish character to a good character. But overall, he's presented as a good guy. But I question whether he is a good guy at all and whether he's got any moral value as a character. Now, as a novel, as it's the first novel, one of the first novels contested, it's a tricky read because it's not the way we would read a novel these days. So if I just read you a bit of the text, and that will give you a bit of a flavour for how it is. It was on the 6th of November, in the 6th year of my reign, or my captivity, whichever you please, that I set out on this voyage, and I found it much longer than I expected. For though the island itself was not very large, yet when I came to the east side of it, I found a great ledge of rocks lie out about 2 leagues into the sea, some above water, some below it, and beyond this a shoal of sand lying dry half a league more, so that I was obliged to go a great way out to sea to double that point. Alright, so first off, it's from the first person perspective, and it's in the form of a diary. I mean, I think that's very good, and in the form of a diary, because some people thought it was an actual diary of a real survivor. That's how kind of good and convincing it is. That's how much in depth Foe goes in describing his survival scenario. But as a novel, it really goes into too much detail, describing the minuscule stuff like things being half a league and then double more, so some above the water, some below the water, which is kind of important. If you're navigating, you want to know which rocks are below the water, as in to have a shallow shelf which could affect your vessel and could even beach you. And I think that the value of Foe's maritime knowledge comes to the front in this novel. It really excels. But as a novel, and the way it's written, I think the text is a bit too stilted and too descriptive about the things which are relatively minor. I mean, they all underline the research that Foe has already completed and his authenticity for sure. But I think that's probably what they do serve. And some things I don't know. I question. So where do we go as a story then? Well, Robinson Crusoe, when he was a young man, his father wanted him to go into middle class kind of business, not going to sea, but he decided to go to sea against his father's wishes. So this is why he got shipwrecked the first time. And then he thinks, oh, that could be because I've gone against my father, etc., etc. So he's a bit of a bad, rough-shot kind of kid, and he goes and does what he wants. And eventually he ends up in the hands of Moors, I think it is, who enslave the crew of the ship he was on, and he endures life as a slave for a while. Now all these incidents come before his final shipwreck. But where he goes from there, he escapes the slavery. He gets a captain. A captain picks him up and basically takes him out to what he calls the Brazils, where he founds a plantation, right? And he has a few. I assume he has some slaves on this plantation working the land for him, which has been taken of native South Americans. And he makes a load of cash out of it. But he's not happy with that. He gets bored and he wants adventure, but he also wants to make more cash. So what he says to a passing sea captain is, let's go over to Africa, let's capture some people and put them into slavery, and I'll have some free business on my plantation, make a fat load of more cash, and we can live off that. So off he goes with this captain who is easily convinced of fat cash. They get shipwrecked, and that's where we start our story proper on this island, right? The annoying bit is, he's the one that morally drives this captain and the crew to go and get these slaves in the first place. And yet he gets shipwrecked, and he's the only one that survives, despite the fact he was the one that brought them there and made it happen. He's the one that's not morally virtuous, he's morally wrong. He should have drowned. But he didn't drown. Why didn't he drown? Come on, fool, get it right. Now, this is the annoying bit as well, and because he survives the shipwreck and the other ones die, right? I'm not sure there is a good description of lots of bodies floating ashore. I think we missed that. But what happens is the ship remains out to sea, a ghost ship. It does survive, which is a miracle. I think that's highly unlikely that's going to happen, but it gives him the golden goose that lays the gun egg to give him the resources to survive on the island for millions of years. And he gets unlimited ammunition, he gets unlimited gunpowder for these guns, gunpowder that never gets wet on this tropical island, even though he puts it in a cave which he digs out with, I think, with wood. I mean, I'm not being funny, but there's got to be a porous rock to be able to dig it out by yourself to excavate such a cave. So I assume there's going to be leakage. So how is he going to keep the powder dry for over a number of years? Unlikely. So you've got golden goose stuff, and he does this magic bullet thing of just suddenly he gets to a point in the plot where he can't find a way forward, so he just invents something which is unbelievable. So it kind of stilts the narrative, and you think it's incredible. But the idea is he survives by killing loads of animals with his fowling gun. He goes to shoot budgies. What a dick. But he has to survive and he has to eat something, so I understand that it's a survival situation. But he does have grains with him, and yet he doesn't plant any of these grains from day one or year one even, because you need to take into account the seasons. But the reason he didn't plant them is he said, "Oh, I didn't think they were going to work." Well, bullshit, you know. He should have been planted then to help his diet along, because it's not healthy just to eat meat. You need to eat other stuff as well, roughage, etc. So he didn't plant it for a while, but eventually he planted it. He grows this expansive kind of food generating place. So he enslaves goats. He puts them in a pen, and he has these fields, and he also goes around shooting birds, and that's how he survives. He finds all this time to make 2 compounds to live in and to keep him protected. The other thing is as well is plot inconsistencies. So you have that survival. I'm not sure, I don't really believe that he would survive that way, but it is good. The detail is excellent. I mean, don't get me wrong, the survival detail is excellent. Folks thought about it a lot. But there are inconsistencies, like the cats and the dogs. The cats and the dog, one dog and a couple of cats survive from the boat, from the ship. But he does not mention it when he initially finds the ship afloat. So magically they appear later on down the line in the story, and it's something he forgot to mention, and it's really frustrating that. The other annoying bit as well is that he only befriends the dog properly, and he kind of semi-befriends the cat, but they only need him for food. And cats do need people for strokes as well, but maybe they're more feral cats, so I'll give him that one. If it's a feral cat, you're not going to befriend it, and you could have a situation where it's symbiotic with you give them a bit of food. But basically, the cat's produced too many kittens, so this is a bit funny. So he drowns the kittens. What a dick! Why does he drown the kittens? That's insane. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Yeah. We're all leading up to Man Friday, aren't we? That's where we're going. But I think before Man Friday arrives, he finds on this boat, this ship, 3 Bibles, right? And this is the other stupid thing. It takes him a number of years to actually think to read the Bibles. So he's just happy, having no entertainment on the island whatsoever, just going out, surviving, building stuff, which could have happened, but I would have at least read a little bit just for a change of pace. Christ on a bike, I think it's pretty unlikely. But basically he finds God. And God is throughout this novel actually. God works in the background. And the moral kind of reason of his shipwreckings is attributed to a work of God, which I think is a load of bullshit. I don't think God, we are still talking about the Christian God, I don't think that's how it would have worked, really. I think it's just Faux trying to incorporate God into the story, where it doesn't necessarily fit in a survival situation. In a survival situation, I don't think God is gonna help you, but hope is, and that's what maybe his mistake is, confusing hope with God. And the two can be the same thing when you're by yourselves out there in the wild, for sure. And it's very easy to find God when you're by yourself. But yeah, he survives all this time, 28 years on the island, and he's mentally well throughout. In fact, Foe even states that this guy is mentally well, he never goes mad. And it's like he fears insanity, because in a way, Crusoe is a part of him. It's written in diary form, so he doesn't want to admit to any mental unwellness. And we have the cannibals as well. So we have the cannibals on the island, so I think it's this is based over the southwestern part of the Atlantic. What's it called? The Caribbean, where there were some cannibal tribes which lived on the island. Was it Haiti, Cuba kind of way? And they did used to travel by boat around the islands. They were logged, so Foe will have been aware of that. So that's where he takes his cannibals from. So basically, these cannibals paddle from another island in order to set upon his island, which is not populated by anyone else. He's scoured the whole island. First he finds footprints, then he actually sights them eventually, and they basically paddle ashore with the only purpose he ever sees is that they bring captives with them of other tribes people who he assumes are of a different tribe to their own, and they slaughter them, butcher them and eat them, and then they go away from the island. So it's some kind of sacrificial island. Now, if I remember correctly, I think it was that they paddled between islands for all sorts of things. I don't know if they did this, I don't remember reading about that, but I do remember them capturing people from islands and slaughtering them. So that kind of thing went on, but not necessarily bringing somebody to an island explicitly to slaughter them. I think that's more of his storytelling, so which is good, you can do that, it's a novel. Let him get away with that. And eventually, first thing he has fear, so he makes a second settlement, so that's why he has 2 settlements, to give him a backup in case they find the first. And then he gets a bit braver when he witnesses them, so he observes them for over a period of time, and he decides he needs to capture one of these natives and interrogate them to find out how he's going to survive, really, to help his own survival. And there's a bit of company as well. So he finds Man Friday, and there's another guy who gets brought ashore as a captive, and the other guy unfortunately gets gutted. And what he does, he comes up with an ingenious method. He has, fortunately, this is why he has a stash of about 5 or 6 bloody rifles. So he loads all of them because he knows the reload time is too short, too quick, too long to be able to survive an onslaught of a number of dudes with daggers or whatever. So he shoots them all, he slaughters them all except for Man Friday, who he saves. Man Friday is then indebted to him, and he becomes his indentured slave. Although it's not explicitly said that he is a slave, he is a slave. And he becomes a slave on the island and company, and I think this is the good bit. It's a kind of warming relationship where they each teach each other the language. So Man Friday learns some basic English, but he's always stated as being a less intelligent guy, and he's always subservient to Crusoe, which is a bit frustrating and doesn't really represent human nature at all. But maybe he was a subservient kind of guy, and I mean, that is possible, there are those people in the world. But I found it annoying that he treated him as a slave throughout for the rest of the novel and assumed that he's like his personal butler. He even came across some Europeans, and they were set at a higher level morally than Man Friday, I think. Although Man Friday does find God, I think that's good. That's good that he does find, well, is it good? I mean, it's good that he finds Christianity. So he does have moral values, he does have a conscience, so that's good. It's not saying that he's a savage and a slave and a brute. So it's showing the potential of humans to be both brutes and good. That's if we because throughout the novel we are saying that the Christian God is good and does good things. So that's good. But he puts these Europeans who get shipwrecked on a different island, I think it is, at a higher level to Man Friday, and I think he even gives them money at some point. But he gives basically he rewards the white people and not the brown people. That's the way the story goes. Man Friday never gets money because when he eventually escapes the island, he finds that he's actually a very rich man from his plantation, and it's all been looked after for him conveniently. And Man Friday never sees any of that money. The captain who helped him establish that plantation in a way gets money and saved him. That he gets money, but I think Man Friday saves him. And I think the lady protests too much with that mental illness, that he didn't have mental illness. And I think it would have made this novel a lot more interesting if Crusoe had have gone a bit more mad, a bit like Tom Hanks in when he was on Castaway. That would have made an awesome novel if he'd shown him metamorphosized into the Tom Hanks character, talking to himself. And I mean, he does have some discussion in his mind with God, where he talks about moral values, but that's not enough for me. I wanted to see a proper mental breakdown and then a return from mental unhealth to mental well-being, assisted by Man Friday. But that's a modern novel. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions on what about white supremacy back in the day, and it simply was the case that it was assumed that any kind of native was of a lower pecking order, lower intelligence, not incapable of finding God and doing tasks and learning, but just less capable than your white man. And it's called a racist novel, but I don't know. I don't think I'd call it a racist novel. Although, yeah, it has racist elements to it. Don't get me wrong, for sure. And it's terrible in places, like the whole idea that he can be enslaved and then become a slave master in a way, and he can't see the contradiction in terms in his own brutishness, and not having any empathy with the slaves is a bit of a disgrace. But overall, I think it's an enjoyable read from a historic perspective. It's going to tell you about the times, the way things were, and it's going to tell you about things like gives you an idea of survival and what the expectations were back then, and a bit about maritime history. So it is excellent for that reason. But as far as a novel's concerned, it's terrible. As a novel, I rated it purely as a novel on Goodreads, and I give it 2 stars because it is what it is. If it hadn't been Robinson Crusoe, I'd have finished it half or 2/3 of the way in, because it's terrible. There's so many holes in the plot. It would sink within 5 seconds at sea. It's ridiculous. But so don't read it as a novel, as a form of entertainment. Read it because it's the first ever novel and you want to know what it's about, but just do be informed. It's a bit of a struggle, and I advise you to read the first 30 pages, get it from your local library, see what you think about it, because it's easy to send it back then. If you buy it, you've almost makes you want to read it. So yeah, I hope you found that useful, and if you did, drop a like and do a subscribe for future content. Drop some comments as well, tell me your thoughts on Robinson Crusoe. But let's not just go down the racial rabbit hole, because it is immense, and we can't go on forever with these things, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I don't know, unfortunately we can't, because we should debate these things more, for sure. But I'm just debating this as a book, as a novel, and I'm purely looking at it from that perspective, and the values of it as a novel. So yeah, I hope you found that useful, and thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned.